Hello, my name is Didi Chiveta. I'm an artist, a writer, and the founder of the Grove Temple of Elysian Mysteries. And what you're watching right now isn't a sermon or lecture or belief system. It's a map. This video exists for people who feel like traditional frameworks, such as religion, self-help, even talk therapy, gave them language but not orientation. If you've ever felt like you understand yourself conceptually, but your nervous system didn't get the memo, if insight didn't translate into stability, if you've done the work but still feel dysregulated, scattered, or exhausted, this is for you. The Grove Temple isn't here to tell you what to believe. It doesn't interpret ancient scripture. It produces living myth, continuously, organically, systematically, using your actual lived experience as data. What I'm showing you today is the cosmology behind that system, the architecture, the machine beneath the meaning. You don't have to agree with any of it. You don't have to join anything. You don't even have to like me. All you have to do is notice whether your body understands what I'm saying before your mind does, because resonance comes before belief. At the heart of the temple is a very simple claim. Life unfolds through structure, not chaos, not randomness, not moral narratives, patterns, cycles, spirals, recurrences, state shifts. We call this underlying architecture the universal machine. And this is important. The machine does not tell stories. It does not assign meaning. It does not care about your personal mythology. It produces movement. You produce the myth. Meaning is the collaboration between the machine's motion and your interpretation of it. That's why two people can live through the same event and emerge with radically different inner worlds. The temple trains you to stop asking, "What does this mean?" and start asking, "What is happening?" Measurement before interpretation, structure before meaning, resonance before belief. This is not spirituality as faith. It is spiritual literacy. The 4 pillars of the temple. I want to walk you through the 4 structural pillars of the temple. You'll see a diagram on the screen as I do this. These are not metaphors. They're functional roles in a system. Pillar number 1, the lighthouse, the still point. The lighthouse is your inner fixed point, your orientation, truth, lucidity, the part of you that can observe without collapsing. In neuroscience terms, this is the capacity for metacognition, the ability to notice your internal state without being consumed by it. Trauma destabilizes this point. When the lighthouse flickers, everything feels personal, urgent, and overwhelming. The temple does not try to heal this through catharsis. It stabilizes it through structure. Myth anchors here. Pillar number 2, the spiral staircase, the transformation path. Growth doesn't happen in straight lines. It happens in cycles. You revisit the same themes, grief, power, intimacy, fear, but at different levels of capacity. That's the spiral. Neuroscience supports this. Learning and integration happen through repetition with variation, not linear progression. If you've ever felt like you're backsliding, you're not failing, you're ascending. Myth evolves here. Pillar number 3, the scaffolding, the architecture of meaning. Underneath your thoughts and feelings is a symbolic framework. Patterns, ratios, archetypes, frequencies. This is how the brain organizes experience. The temple makes this scaffolding visible so you can work with it instead of being unconsciously ruled by it. Myth organizes itself into form here. Pillar number 4, the record of resonance, the divine seismograph. Your journals, timestamps, dreams, drawings, rituals, these are not just personal artifacts, they are calibration logs, evidence of the machine moving through your life. Trauma disrupts memory continuity, pattern tracking restores it, myth becomes legible here. Before I go any further, I want to be very clear about the structure of the temple. The Grove Temple rests on 4 pillars. These pillars hold orientation, transformation, structure, and record. They are the framework that allows the system to function. What comes next is not a 5th pillar in the same sense. It's the engine that moves the pillars. We call that engine mythogenesis. The cornerstone and engine of the Grove Temple is mythogenesis. Here's where all this mysticism becomes practical. Trauma damages the brain's ability to predict safety. Recording resonance without judgment. This restores neural coherence. The brain relearns cause and effect. Time becomes continuous again. The emotional landscape stabilizes. You're not bypassing emotion, you're giving it structure. Mysticism and neuroscience agree on this. The nervous system needs orientation before insight. That's what myth does when it's alive. As you can see from the date in the corner of the page, what you're watching me paint right now is a prophecy that began 2 years ago on January 9th, 2024. I drew this lighthouse because it was a vision that just came so strongly in my mind that day. So I just jotted it down on this page really quickly, and it sat in the sketchbook on that bookcase for 2 years. Until the approach of the Mars Cazimi. Watch it. And I realized that what changed was not the drawing. What changed was time. A Cazimi in astrology is a very specific movement. It happens when a planet moves so close to the sun that it enters the sun's core of visibility. So it's not hidden, not eclipsed, but purified. The word Cazimi comes from an old phrase meaning in the heart of the sun. Astrologically, it marks a reset point, a moment when the planet's themes are burned clean and re-expressed with clarity. And here's the part that matters. Mars Cazimi happens in roughly 2-year cycles. So when Mars returns to the heart of the sun, it is not just a transit, it is a closing and reopening of a loop. When the Mars Cazimi arrived this year, on the exact same date, January 9th, something in my body recognized it before my mind did. I went to my bookshelf, pulled down that journal, and there was the lighthouse, undisturbed and waiting. Now here is where this stops being abstract and starts becoming evidence. On my birth chart, my sun is in Aries. Aries is ruled by Mars, which means Mars doesn't just influence me symbolically. It governs my vital force, my drive, my ignition system. So when Mars moves, I feel it, not as a belief, as a pattern. And what I want you to notice here is that I did not plan this. I didn't remember the drawing. I didn't mark a reminder. I didn't set an alarm on my phone. I didn't say, oh, in 2 years I'll come back and complete this. This system remembered. My body remembered. This is why journaling matters. Not because it tells you what to think, not because it gives you answers, but because it records truth without interpretation. When you journal consistently, especially when you add timestamps and dates and record your internal state, you begin to build something like a seismograph. You start to see movements before you understand their meaning. The lighthouse drawing wasn't a message, it was a measurement, a snapshot of my inner orientation at a specific moment in time. And 2 years later, when the same planetary energy returned, the drawing came back into relevance without effort. That's coherence. The lighthouse itself is not complicated, it's not ornate, it doesn't need decoration. A lighthouse is a still point in a moving system. It doesn't chase ships, it doesn't demand attention, it simply holds position. And that's why it's the first pillar of the temple. The lighthouse's orientation, not control, not prediction, orientation. What you're watching me do in this footage is not finishing the drawing. I'm activating it. By painting it during the Mars Cazimi, I'm closing a 2-year loop. The drawing becomes a bridge between who I was then and who I am now. And because it was recorded, I can prove the continuity. This is what journaling gives you that talk therapy often cannot. Talk therapy works primarily through narrative, through interpretation, through story. But trauma fragments story. What trauma often leaves intact is pattern recognition. When you track time, sensation, repetition without forcing meaning, you allow the nervous system to reestablish coherence. This is not mystical. This is neurological. Low-stakes pattern recognition activates safety. Safety allows clarity. Clarity allows choice. When you look back and see that your energy moves in cycles, that things return when you're ready, the future stops feeling random. It starts feeling legible. So this lighthouse is not just a symbol, it's proof. Proof that something in me knew where I was headed before I could articulate it. Proof that my system was already aligning. What you're looking at here is my book of thresholds. This isn't a journal in the traditional sense. It's not a diary. I don't recount what I did every single day. It's not a place where I try to be consistent or productive or even coherent. It's a threshold document. I open this book when I'm standing between versions of myself, between what was working and what can't work anymore, between who I've been surviving as and who I'm quietly becoming. The rule of this book is simple. Nothing gets polished, nothing gets explained away, everything is allowed to be true as it arrives. This is where symbols show up before I understand them. In my Book of Thresholds entry from August 3rd, 2025, the imagery of the lighthouse in the Leviathan from this painting came to me again for the first time since I did the line drawing on January 9th. The affirmations for this page are: I am safe in my bubble. The world can wait while I float and heal. My light still reaches the horizon, even when I'm resting. I move at the pace of my own waters, and every ripple carries me closer to wholeness. The Leviathan across cultures is the massive sea creature, the thing that lives below awareness, the unconscious, the ocean of power, creative force and destruction in the same body. In my notes, the Leviathan isn't a monster to be conquered. The Leviathan is what happens when raw power exists without a vessel. When energy is too big for the nervous system that's holding it, when intuition outruns structure, when truth arrives faster than language, the Leviathan isn't evil, it's uncontained. On this day, the Leviathan was my fibromyalgia. Most of you who know me in person know that I struggle with chronic illnesses. I have psoriatic arthritis and fibromyalgia, which means that I live with chronic pain and chronic fatigue. And a few years ago, I started closely tracking my symptoms, initially just to make the doctor's appointments go more smoothly, so I have all the information that they need to come to a conclusion on my diagnosis, my treatment. But in the process of this documentation, I noticed patterns. I noticed that my fibro flares tend to coincide with major astrological movements. So the Leviathan is the raw power inside of me. It's the power that allows me to write an entire cosmology, to create an entire religion from my own mind. That's a lot of internal power, and my body is the vessel. And, I have the same human body that everyone else does, even though I have a lot more going on in my mind. So that creates a pressure for my nervous system, pressure for my body that also often translates into pain. And I've realized through this process of journaling and keeping track of timestamps that I have less flare-ups and less intense flare-ups. And I'm better able to predict when one is coming, so it becomes less disruptive for my life. now we move on to the symbolism of the lighthouse, according to my Book of Threshold entry from August 3rd, 2025. The lighthouse isn't there to fight the ocean. It doesn't dominate the sea. It doesn't calm the waves. It simply stands, rooted, vertical, lit from within. A lighthouse doesn't stop the Leviathan. It gives the waters something to orient around. In this entry, I wrote that the lighthouse is the vessel, the axis mundi, the place where energy can move through without overwhelming the body. That's important because the lighthouse isn't control, it's containment. Now, you don't have to believe in anything for the temple system to work. You don't have to share my worldview. You don't have to call this spiritual. You don't have to agree with my language. You just have to be here. What we're doing here works because the human nervous system responds to safety, rhythm, and attention, whether or not we attach meaning to it. This is not about faith, it's about physiology. Your body is always listening. Long before you decide what you believe, your nervous system is scanning for cues. Is this environment predictable? Is the pace gentle? Am I allowed to stay, or do I need to brace? When you sit with repetitive motion, brush strokes, page turns, slow layering, your body starts to receive a very simple message. Nothing is about to happen. You are allowed to stay. Repetition is one of the oldest tools humans have for regulating stress. It's why rocking soothes babies. It's why people hum when they're overwhelmed. It's why handwork like weaving, stitching, and drawing has existed in every culture. The rhythm tells your body you don't need to anticipate, you don't need to perform, you don't need to explain yourself. Just stay with the moment. When the body feels safe enough, the mind doesn't have to keep interrupting. That's where healing actually happens. Not an insight, not an understanding, but an embodiment. A lot of people think healing means figuring something out. But insight alone rarely changes anything. You can understand your patterns perfectly and still feel stuck in them, because insight happens in the thinking mind, and healing happens in the body. This practice gently moves attention out of analysis and into sensation. What does the paper feel like? What happens when color meets water? How does your breath change when nothing is being demanded of you? That shift from thinking about yourself to being with yourself is subtle but powerful, and it doesn't require belief. Even skeptics respond to this. Even people who say, I don't do spiritual stuff, because what's actually happening here is very simple. Attention slows, breath deepens, muscle tension releases, the nervous system recalibrates. Creativity heals not because it's mystical, but because it gives your body a nonverbal way to process. Words are not always the right tool. Some experiences live too deep in the body to be spoken. Color, texture, movement, these bypass the parts of us that learn to armor up through language. This is why people often feel emotional after creative work, not during. The body finishes something the mind couldn't. And that's also why you don't need to be good at this. Skill is irrelevant. This isn't about producing something impressive. It's about letting the process hold you. You don't have to believe in healing for your nervous system to settle. You don't have to believe in ritual for repetition to work. You don't have to believe in magic for attention to change your internal state. The body responds first. Meaning comes later or not at all. Both are fine. If at any point you find your mind drifting, that's okay. If you feel bored, restless, emotional, sleepy, that's okay too. Nothing here needs to be forced. This is an invitation, not a demand. You can come back to this as many times as you need. You can let it run in the background. You can half listen. You can start and stop. The work continues either way. Because the most important thing isn't what you think about this practice. It's that for a few minutes, your body learns something new. I can exist without urgency. I can create without pressure. I can be present without explaining myself. That's the foundation. That's why this works. And that's enough. I want to name something clearly before we close. What you're encountering here is not a belief system. It's not a mythology in the traditional sense. It's a cosmology of practice. Most cosmologies in recorded human history are built around answers. Who the gods are, how the universe began, what is right or wrong, what happens after death. They organize people around explanations. The Grove Temple system doesn't work like that. Instead of asking what is true, it asks what works. Instead of centering doctrine, it centers process. Instead of offering a story about the universe, it offers a way to relate to experience, moment by moment, body by body, context by context. There's no required narrative here. No conversion, no hierarchy of belief, no endpoint you're trying to reach. That's what makes it different. Historically, cosmologies tend to stabilize power by fixing meaning. This one stays deliberately unfixed. It assumes that meaning is situational, relational, and alive. Your experience is not filtered through a sacred text. The text emerges from lived experience. Your body is not something to transcend. It is the primary site of knowledge. Time is not linear progress toward enlightenment. It's cyclical, recursive, revisitable. And healing is not something granted by authority. It is something that unfolds when conditions are right. And that's why this framework can sit alongside any religion or none at all. It doesn't replace anyone's God. It doesn't contradict anyone's faith. It simply offers a container where nervous systems can settle, creativity can metabolize experience, meaning can arise without coercion. If there's a cosmological claim here, it's a modest one. That humans heal through attention, rhythm, relationship, and care, and that those elements don't belong to any single culture, era, or institution. Everything else is optional, and you can choose what works for your unique incarnation. You're allowed to interpret this symbolically, psychologically, artistically, or spiritually. Nothing collapses if you disagree. That too is part of the structure. This isn't about creating followers, it's about creating conditions and trusting that what emerges when people are given enough safety to listen to themselves. That's the difference, and that's where we'll leave it. I know I'm giving you a lot of information right now, all kinds of cosmology, metaphysics. I'm throwing astrology at you. I'm sure even the astrology fans in the audience have never even heard of a Cazimi. It's very, very dense terminology. But here's what it really boils down to. Hopefully you can see from the examples I've given of my book of thresholds and the painting that I've been showing through this footage is that journaling functions as navigation. This is what journaling actually does. It's not just a record of your life. I did this thing today. I felt this thing yesterday. It's a compass. It lets you see how your energy moves over time, not just how you feel in the moment. You stop asking, why am I like this? And start seeing, oh, this is how my system evolves. The future doesn't arrive randomly. It echoes. It follows the movements of the universal machine. As we come to the end of this transmission, I want to name the intention that holds it together. This work exists to share healing wisdom, not as doctrine, not as demand, but as something living, something you can take what you need from and leave the rest. The Grove Temple is not here to replace anything you already believe. It does not ask you to abandon your faith, your culture, or your language for meaning. Its practices do not conflict with the major religions of the world. The practices of the Grove Temple are designed to sit beside them, to support nervous systems, to help people listen to themselves more clearly, and to offer structure where life has been overwhelming. This is a mental health framework rooted in creativity, ritual, and self-observation. It is a place where intuition is respected, where embodiment matters, and where no one is asked to believe anything they do not feel in their own body. If something in this video helps you feel calmer, more oriented, or more at home in yourself, that is the work it's meant to do. If you'd like to continue exploring, you can find the Grove Temple online at thegrovetemple.com, where the larger framework lives. There's also a temple Patreon where I share ongoing teachings, reflections, and ritual practices for those who want to go deeper. And through my DigiChiveta Patreon, I share the art, journaling practices, and creative process that form the visual and material side of the system. Everything is offered as an invitation, never an obligation. And now, before we close, I want to offer a blessing. May this work greet you gently. May it help you trust your own timing. May it remind you that clarity does not require urgency, and that healing does not need to be loud to be real. May your body feel safer inhabiting itself. May your voice, spoken or unspoken, be honored. May you recognize your own rhythms and build a life that respects them. And if this path is not yours, may you leave with something useful anyway. A breath, a moment of stillness, or the quiet reassurance that nothing about you is broken. Thank you for being here. Thank you for witnessing. Thank you for moving through the world with curiosity. The work continues, the light stays on, and you are always welcome to return. Ashe.